Thank you so much for staying with us. The National Housing Data Technical Committee recently pegged the national deficit at 14.9 million housing units as of January this year. They focused on structural inadequacy rather than just total missing homes. To close this gap within a decade, stakeholders estimate Nigeria needs to build at least 550,000 homes annually. It has been said that addressing the shortfall requires an estimated 21 trillion naira, while average house prices in major cities now sit around 320 million for one, with the cheapest entry-level options around 8 million. I don't even know where to begin, but we have this morning with us the Executive Director of Estate Services at the Federal Housing Authority, Ezekiel Nya-Etok. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Which one of them did you meet when you were growing up?
I was going to say.
Housing for all by year 2000, Housing for all by year 2010, Housing for all by year 2020. Which one of them do you remember?
I think I remember a little more than you have said so far, but the most popular was Housing for All by the year 2000. And of course, 2000 came and passed like any other thing, and nothing happened, and all that. I think that's what everybody knows, but I'm sure what they want to hear now is to what extent have we done anything about it for where we are today?
Well, perhaps that's a good place for us to begin the conversation, Mr. Nya-Etok. Let's go a bit historical. I know we don't have much time, but let's go a bit historical. As far back as I can remember, I know Nigeria has been having national development plans for even before independence. And I'm almost certain that every one of those development plans included one housing program or the other. Even as at, is it 2022, after the passing of the easing out of the COVID-19 pressures that we had, the government came up with some kind of economic sustainability programs at the time, and it also included some housing initiatives. From where you sit, and now that you are in the position to know, what are those things that, beyond the data and all of those things, what are those things that you would say are the real issues confronting provision of houses by Nigerians for Nigerians, or by government for Nigerians?
Okay, at the risk of being misunderstood, I'm going to talk from two perspectives. The first is that I am an employee, I'm an appointee of Mr. President, so I'm expected to talk about this government, which I will to a great extent. But at the same time, I'm a Nigerian whose passion and commitment is first and foremost to this country called Nigeria. So I'm going to talk almost as an advocate as well. One of the biggest problems that housing has is that of advocacy. And people don't realize that government operates by what we call lines of least resistance. There is a lot of problem with respect to, let me come to current times where we are today. We have a lot of problems with respect to security or the lack of it. We're having a lot of problems with power. We have a lot of problems with healthcare, with education. So most of the time when we hear people talk, they say we need problems with power, we have problem with security, we have problem with education and healthcare. Hardly do we bring housing into the fold of the major challenges that we have. As a result, past governments seem to, like I said, attack lines of least resistance. Where there's a lot of pressure, they seem to talk about it. But I think it's one of the biggest problems that we've made, where I give this administration a lot of credit for, because over the years, I've shouted myself hoarse for us to take good care of housing to solve a lot of our problems. I'll just give you two little issues. Number one, productivity. Without a man who sleeps well at night, when he comes to your office, he will probably use the office as a time to have where the place is cool and he just wants to sleep because through the night he didn't sleep. The next thing is psychological. Housing brings about the dignity of a man. A man who does not have a roof over his head to take care of his family, he can't think well. Psychologically, he's devastated. It comes to productivity will always be low. Third, in terms of health, except you have a decent environment, certain basic health issues will continue to occur. Malaria that is so prevalent. By the time you have proper environment where mosquitoes don't breed, you almost eliminate malaria. Another thing is something very important is that you'll be shocked that over 60% of your salary goes into housing. People don't really take time to think and do this analysis. The most important, if I may even call it that because they are also important, is the fact that housing is the one area where if you invest in it, it impacts the economy, the local economy directly. And it is one of the biggest creators of jobs. So you can't talk of power without housing. You can't talk of security without housing. You can't talk of healthcare or education without housing. That's why at the base of Maslow's pyramid of human needs is food, clothing, and shelter, which is housing. And then in the Constitution, it's clearly stated that the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. You can't talk of welfare except you start with the fundamental, the basic, which is housing. Now, when you put all this together, you discover that government has so much to do, so little resources, so they deploy their resources where there's highest amount of noise. So the biggest problem of housing is that it has not been prioritized in spite of how much it brings into governance, how much it brings into employment, how much it brings into, the basics, the fundamentals of life. The local economy stimulation, road construction, building of any infrastructure, nothing impacts local economy like housing. If you build an estate where you deploy about 5 billion in, say, Uyo, a minimum of 4.8 billion will go into the local economy. You don't want to think, I say this as somebody who's done probably one of the biggest projects in this country that had that scale. I did the Shelter Afraid project. We had just about 400 houses, but we had about 700 contractors, employed over 10,000 people, and it is documented that the insecurity reduced to almost zero because the young people were getting money every day. They're working from morning till night. At night, they're so tired. They go to sleep, getting ready for the next day. So when government starts to prioritize housing, they solve a lot of their problems.
Right, and those, I mean, I'm seeing the problems that you're talking about being, the problems of, employment, of local people to take part in some of, the building or the construction of some of these houses. But, you started earlier by saying that, if a man or a family have, a roof over their head, it protects their children, protect the wives and the husband and all that, and, they have less to think about. But when you think of it, it's one thing to be able to get a house as shelter. Is another thing for it to be affordable. Now, a lot of people are desire to have homes, to build or to buy. It's one thing to buy land if you want to, buy for yourself. Even if you engage in the government schemes where maybe they give land for you to build or they build for you to buy, and then you pay over a time, it's still a lot of money to be paid. And a lot of people still cannot afford this because there's so many other things to do. There's school fees to pay, there's petrol to buy for your cars if you have a car, there's transport if you don't have a car. So you now have to start prioritizing what you're going to pay for, and then the housing is just a pipe dream at the end of the day.
Okay, I'll thank you. Very, very correct. I'll rush this as much. If we had a 2-hour program, we wouldn't be able to exhaust it, but I'll rush it as much as possible. The very first thing is what I tried to lay, which is intervention of government. Government will not intervene in areas a lot of times where there isn't maximum pressure from the people. As a matter of fact, in the housing policy, where I was privileged to be the vice chairman that we had after about 22 years, it said that the noise of the people woke up government is there in the housing policy. So because government has so much to do and so little resources, it is where there is maximum attention. For instance, if I want to contest election and I want to campaign, how many of the people that are talking of housing? They will tell you we'll fix power, we'll provide employment, because they think these are the things that people want to hear. But one of the biggest problems of man is housing. And like you said, they don't have the resources. There are ways that housing can become more affordable. How do you do it? Number one is the policies of government. You know, there's so much little details that people don't know. Having worked with or working with Federal Housing Authority, there's a difference between selling land and allocating land. Federal Housing Authority does not sell land. We allocate land. But I'll tell you this, a practical example. If I were to allocate a plot of land to you in, say, Gwarimpa, you will not pay more than 10 to 15 million for 1,000 square meters of land. You won't. But that same plot of land that goes for 10 to 15 million, sold in the market, everybody knows it goes for over 150 to 180 million. Now, a policy could come that says, number one, if we allocate this land to you, you must develop it in not more than 3 years, and you must fully develop it within 5 years. Now, that could be there, but there's a second part. The second part will say, you cannot sell this land for the next 10 years. What that means is that anybody who buys this land from you is not going to have the papers done until minimum of 10 years. What does that allow? It makes sure that land is allocated to people who have need of the land to build on the land and not to speculators. That means that a senator that already has a house in Gwarimpa does not necessarily want to have another unless he's going to build it. He can build it and rent it out. He can build it to sell, but he's got to be the one to develop it. Now, the cost is going to be less because his cost of land is just about 10, 15 million. But when that land is sold to another developer who is buying for 150 million, that's already base cost that he's got to impute. And as a result, the delivery cost is going to plus over 100 million, whether it's shared between the number of units that get in there. But the important thing is that how do we get to a point where land is allocated strictly to those who have need to either build and live or build and do business with it? Now, that's a very important area that I think that government will have to look into. Now, the current government has attacked some other aspects. The second thing I want to tell you about affordability is you don't buy a house the way you buy a car. You don't go pick and then pay and move, which is what people are doing. And at worst, they will tell you pay within 30, maybe 3 months or 6 months, or if you are very lucky, they can give you 2 years window. That is not the way housing is done. Can we have a policy where we come and energize, we kind of recapitalize like the Federal Mortgage Bank, bring in a 500 billion, and then now create, I can give you a very simple scale where any state you go, any estate you build, you'll have a minimum of 500 workers that can have that affordability to buy a house. But the Federal Mortgage Bank does not have that latitude as much as they are trying because it's not properly recapitalized. And where you do not have mortgages, people are doing, cash and carry, and that never works in housing delivery. Secondly,
okay.
There is the issue of...
Keep going, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Nya-Etok.
I can't hear you again.
Okay, just keep going.
Okay, fine. Now, apart from the issue of affordability, you come into job creation. The housing is being stifled. I am in the Federal Housing Authority, and we are building estates in several states. Now, you cannot do procurement where you must kind of put in a minimum of 2 to 3 million for you to satisfy those conditions, and then come and be given one house to build where your profit margin is going to be, say, 1 million. Now, that procurement process has tied the hands of a lot of agencies that would want to build houses. If you are building a bungalow, everybody knows you don't need these big construction companies to build a bungalow for you. But you must go through the procurement process. So can government look into that issue in mass delivery of housing in a way that when you go up 2, 3, 4 floors, you can go on the big contractors, but you can stimulate the local economy by building 200 housing units in Akwa Ibom State by 200 contractors, where one contractor takes one house and then he's able to bring his own people. So all the 200 houses are going on at the same time by 200 contractors, employing so many people. But those contractors cannot have those one houses, because for you to qualify on a procurement process, you need to have these and that and that. For you to have all those things, you must have spent nothing less than 2-3 million. And you can't do that to now come and get a job of 20 million. It can't work. So government may need to look into that procurement process with respect to housing delivery, if they can think outside the box. The other thing that is being done by this administration, which is fantastic, is that, you have delivery of housing by government, you have delivery of government housing by not institutions now, by like REDAN, Real Estate Developers Association of Nigeria, by companies. Then you have delivery of houses by individuals. Really, delivery of housing by individuals is what is prevalent, and it shouldn't be so. You should be able to have these people, because very few people want to live in their father's house. Most people want to have where they can live. But now this government is able to, through Federal Housing Authority, have a kind of working relationship which has not existed before with the state. So there's a partnership. The Federal Housing Authority, for instance, led by Honorable Oyetunde Ojo, we've been able to go to about 30 states as at now, creating partnership, creating synergy with the state government. We sit with them. They bring some form of subsidy by giving land free, and then we now are looking at other agencies that can intervene and bring other forms of subsidy, so that social housing being subsidized housing. I'll just give you a little module that will help us. If I have a contractor to build this house for me, and the cost of construction is 20 million, I am going to add about 30 to 40, 45%, depending on the location, on what we call infrastructure costs, because Federal Housing Authority will never build houses where we don't have full infrastructure. Okay, if you take maybe about 20, 25% or 30%, that house of 20 million is going to have additional 10 million of infrastructure added. It takes it to 30 million. After that, you are now going to have cost of funds, because we are not funded by government. Federal Housing Authority is not on budget, and I'm happy we are not on budget. So you're going to put cost of funds, and then it's going to take it maybe to about 35 million. You're now going to put cost of land, if it's not subsidized, that could take it to 40 million. You now say, let's have 10, 15% profit margin. It goes to about 45 million. So cost of construction, 20 million, delivery cost, 45 million. So what is now happening is that we are now bringing those down by governments giving free land. That takes up about 3 to 5 million. And now we are also interfacing with the government to see how they can knock off infrastructure. That will bring it down to about 30 million. And then we now bring down. So bottom line is that this government is looking at being able to deliver a house of 20 million base cost at not more than 30 million as much as possible. If there is this cooperation, government policy can say, South-South Development Commission, take infrastructure in this estate so that you can knock off that extra.
But
NDDC,
Mr. Nya-Etok,
and all these different organizations, FEMA.
Yeah, my apologies. All of that is taken and all of that is given. And I hope you can hear me now. Now, there is something you mentioned about mortgage. As far back as I can remember, I think as far back as I can remember, there is this government initiative called the Federal Mortgage Bank. I don't know if it is something that you think Nigerians should be encouraged to explore, because you know very well, Mr. Nya-Etok, when it comes to government, the cynicism of people is always alerting. So people are unsure, people are uncertain. Generally, the trust level is very, very low. Now, so on the one hand, there is that provision by government. On the other hand is the distrust, if I can, put it that way, of whatever it is that is government. Do you think a partnership with the private sector might also help? That organizations that have, fairly good pay packages for their teams, rather than they forming cooperatives in their organizations, maybe if there is some kind of soft landing, some kind of provision for private sector operators, like Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, and the rest of them like that. Maybe that can also be an avenue through which the Federal Housing Authority can perform its function. The Federal Mortgage Bank on one hand, and then this engagement with private sector, aside from your engagement with states. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Again, I give credit to this government because probably for the first time, there's a very proper handshake between Federal Housing Authority and Federal Mortgage Bank. These are the only two agencies of government that are with Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. So right now, there's a good handshake between the two bodies, which is very, very good. Secondly, I happen to be in charge of, I'm the Executive Director, Estate Services. So marketing is directly under my office. And exactly what you have said, these organizations are coming to my office. We are interfacing with them. We are networking with the Federal Mortgage Bank to see to what extent they could have, this National Housing Fund, once you're a contributor to it, to see to what extent they can give us, off-takers, a kind of off-take guarantee on the basis of which we can now develop, since we are not funded by government at all in any way, except a time comes when there is a policy of government that says, look, I want to vote about 50 billion every year into housing for the young people and the government workers. Federal Housing Authority give us a template, set up an SPV for you to deliver this so that there's incremental, flow of houses into. I think the current government is also thinking along that line. But the bottom line is that when you have so many of them, it depends on the current capacity of Federal Mortgage Bank. As of today, Federal Mortgage Bank is completely transparent, completely. There was a time that it was very opaque. They were taking your money. You didn't understand where the money was going to, what was happening. But today, you have your account, given to you on a regular basis. So there's faith being restored in Federal Mortgage Bank, and a lot of people are going back. But then, think of this. All they take from workers is 2.5%. 2.5%. That means if you're earning 100,000, all they are taking from you is 2,500 naira, 2,500 naira. Extrapolate that to about 100,000 workers, it comes to nothing. But when they give you a facility, they can now start to draw down about 30%. So what do? Give Federal Mortgage Bank that latitude, that recapitalization, so that they have a lot of money that they can now take on a lot of people. Then they will now be not taking 30% and 2.5% again, but 30%. That is where we are going to have a boom of mortgage, facilities in Nigeria. As of today, Federal Mortgage Bank, I happen to know very well the management, the MD is a brother and a friend, and I know the discussions we are having on a daily basis the kind of interactions, but they need that muscle of government. Government does not have all the money, but we can start to think outside the box. I look forward to a time we can sit down with the Minister of Housing, sorry, not Minister of Housing, because the great guy coming, the former person, I can tell you, a great guy, the guy coming also, fantastic person, the PAMSEC, they are all very zealous. They are not like the people in the past where they are just like sitting down and wondering. Today, people are thinking outside the box. Just some days back, probably 2-3 days, I sat with the Permanent Secretary, Federal Minister of Housing, and we spent about 2 hours. All we were doing was just brainstorming what can be done, where can it come from, and all those things. I think that there's a lot going on within this administration that is prioritizing housing. And I think the foundation that has been laid, a lot of times in housing, you don't like, housing is not like groundnut. It's more like coconut.
Right.
Groundnut you plug, and the next few months you are reaping. But in housing, it's like coconut.
Yes,
you plant, it takes a lot of time before it starts to yield.
Yes, I get you. And, you know, well, I'm praying that all your brainstorming sessions and endless hours of meetings will pay off, especially because I wanted to reiterate a specific issue. What specific reforms in the FHA is the FHA pushing to make entry-level home ownership accessible to the middle and low-income classes, especially, you know, you just mentioned it, mortgage percentages by primary mortgage banks, which are quite high. Again, affordability.
Fantastic. First, we say that it's not, let me leak a little secret. I'm in charge of the estates. In 55 years of Federal Housing Authority, they've done less than 50 estates, about 50 estates, which means less than 1 estate per year on the average over the past 50 years. And that's unacceptable by any standard. Now, in the past 2 years that we've come in this administration, we have gotten prime land in over 20, in about 30 states, 30 in 2 years. Second, we've done groundbreaking in Akwa Ibom State, we've done it in Kaduna State, we've done it in Abia State. And before you can get to that level of doing groundbreaking, it means you've gone through all the processes of procurement of the land and all it needs to be able to have a title. It takes a while, but we're able to fast forward because we went to each state and sat with them. And then apart from that, we have actually gone through the procurement process, which is a very frustrating process, I would say. And it's not about this administration, it's general with respect to housing. We need to have that conversation of procurement process. It can take you 1 year to go through it, but everybody's like, where are the houses, where are the houses? You just can't go and build. You must go through processes of getting the contractors to build and everything. So what they've done in this administration is, one, let's go on what you call social housing, which is subsidized housing. All the states have given us the lands free. I can tell you that authoritatively. That knocks off costs from it. Secondly, they have gone ahead to pay the compensation, and even like Abia, done the clearing for us, and some of them are saying, can you give us a design? Let us see how we can look at the infrastructure. Each of those is reducing the cost. Each of them is reducing the cost. And I will not stand here to tell you it is this amount, but what I'm telling you is that a house of 20 million would sell for about 45 million because of what I've told you. But when you're able to net off infrastructure, net off cost of land, net off compensation, you are coming down to the 30s.
Okay.
And we are now looking for how we can even go below the 30s.
You know,
which is going to be like knocking off about 50%. You know, which is what we are doing in Federal Housing Authority as at today.
I'm really looking forward to a time, Mr. Nya-Etok, where, I mean, these things will not just be talk. Maybe it's a conversation we're definitely still going to have, because people want to know that, one, these things are working, and secondly, you talked about the partnership with the FHA and the Federal Mortgage Bank. We're hoping that in no distant future we'll be able to see some of these things and have another conversation with you about how all of this is working in the interest of Nigerians. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and thanks for everything that you do. Ezekiel Nya-Etok is Executive Director
Always a delight. Thank you.
of Estate Services at the Federal Housing Authority. Sincere appreciation once again.